One second. Hi, everyone. It's Nasia and Kristen from Les Maisons Partners, and we are so excited today because we have what we think is probably the best expert that we could possibly tap into in the real estate industry, and that is our friend, the certified appraiser.
Yeah, we think that we're important, but everyone knows.
Everybody knows the appraiser trumps all. So
Yeah.
we're so happy to have you here. Please introduce yourself and talk a little bit more about your role in the company.
Okay. Well, my name is Sanedria Potter. I am a certified appraiser. I'm going into my 20th year. I got started flipping houses, got a pretty bad deal, and went to appraisal school initially just to be an informed investor, and it turned into a career. And like I said, I'm going into my 20th year, and my company is called Real Appraisals, and we provide real values real fast.
That's what we love. So I know that a lot of the people who are listening, either they might be home buyers or they may be investors and even real estate professionals. And so there's like so much mystery, I think, and it doesn't even need to be, but there's so much mystery, perceived mystery around the appraisal process. So can you talk a little bit about what an appraisal is for those who may be buying a home for the first time? And then talk a little bit about how some of these values are actually determined for the appraisal.
Okay.
So first, like,
And
what an
what
appraisal
was the first
is
part of your
first.
question?
Like, what is an appraisal
Okay, gotcha.
and your role in the process, and then kind of how are values determined? So, two-part question.
So an appraisal is an estimate of value. So an appraiser goes out and looks at your property, which is what we call a subject property. And then from your property, we find recent sales that are close in proximity that have similar features to yours. And we find out what the market reaction was to those features. And then that's how we come up with what yours is worth. And so we have to have a minimum of 3, but you can have a maximum of however many it takes to support your value. But at a minimum, you have to have 3. And then we do a series of plus and minus adjustments all the way down the particular sale. And so at the bottom, so we start with 3 actual sales prices. And then at the bottom, we have 3 adjusted sales prices. And from there, we determine from that range is the subject property at the top, the middle, the bottom, and then we come up with the final number.
Okay.
We actually have 3 approaches to value. The income approach is when a property produces income, your multifamily apartments, things like that, duplexes, triplexes, quadruplexes. We also have the cost approach. And the cost approach is like in new construction. So we determine the value of the property based on the cost. But the most widely used is the sales comparison approach. So that's the approach that most people are familiar with. And that's the most widely used approach. And that is the one that I described earlier, where we take similar sales, hence the name sales comparison approach. We take similar sales that have features that are comparable to the subject property, and we determine what the market reaction was to those features and then come up with a final value from there.
I think that's probably the thing that people are most used to, especially like real estate agents. I think one of the most common challenges that people face, especially like agents, is they say, wow, I thought I priced something correctly. I thought that our contract price was one that was going to appraise, and that's what
Right.
we kind of term it as. And I think that's one of the most common challenges. Can you speak to, is there anything that you would suggest to the real estate agents or to homeowners as kind of tips for how to best prep for an appraisal and how really to kind of price things correctly so that it does meet that appraisal value?
Right. So you said so that it meets it.
Well, or exceeds it.
So every interview I do, when you guys have certain language that you use, I'm like, what do you mean?
Right.
I know what you mean, but the way that you say it, like we have to be very careful, like how
Yes.
we,
Right.
do you know what I mean?
Yes.
But with the value, what I would say to agents, so I was in Savannah because I was taking the salesperson exam.
Great.
Yeah, and I actually passed. That test was a beast. I know I don't have to
Congratulations.
tell you guys. Uh, I thought the appraisal exam was a beast, but the salesperson exam was a beast. But I
True.
passed. But what I found in going through the course, the 75-hour course, and then going through the exam, is that agents spend a lot of time like listing houses and doing CMAs and things like that. And the amount of time that was given to valuation in the course and the exam was very little.
Yes.
And so I would say that's probably where most of the issues come from, is because you're learning out in the, like you're actually, listing people houses as you learn, because it wasn't given to you in the course material. And depending on what brokerage you're with, people have different levels of training. So from my experience, and I'm not saying this is every situation, but from my experience, when the values don't match and they say the appraisal killed the deal, which I hate that term. Um, Most of the times when I look at the CMA and how the original list price was derived, it's completely incorrect. I would say
Right.
probably 99% of the time it's totally incorrect. The house is 1920 and they got comps in the CMA that's new construction, some of them
Right.
that are multifamily and duplexes when the house is single family. And so the biggest thing that I would say is that you have to pull more than sales prices and addresses. We as appraisers have to deep dive. And so if you pull a CMA and on paper it looks like, okay, I found 6 sales in the area, and so this should be the value based on these 6 sales, you have to really dig into those 6 sales to make sure that they're truly comparable, because on surface it may look like they're in the neighborhood and they're comparable, but is one 1920 and one new construction? Is one 1,000 square feet and the other one's 2,000 square feet? Like, you have to look a little deeper than just the address and the sales price in the CMA. And so when I look through the CMAs that were previously pulled to list the properties, 99% of the time it's a bad CMA. So it's not the appraiser killing the deal. It's like the CMA wasn't done correctly. So if that part is fixed, then you'll get the price right the first time. The appraisal won't be a surprise because we're pulling from the same database. So where you guys pull the CMA from and where we pull the comps from to do the appraisal is the same database.
So I do
So
have
that's why,
a
like when the
question.
agents, when I come to do the appraisal, sometimes the agents have these nice little folders made for me with all their little comps that they pull. There's nothing wrong with that, but every appraiser still has to do their own due diligence and their own research. But if the agent is pulling correctly and the appraiser is pulling correctly, we're pulling from the same database, so our information should be very similar. So the times where it's totally off or totally not similar, it's usually a bad CMA.
Okay, I do
Not
have
saying
a
that it can't be a bad appraisal, because it can be, but I'm just speaking in my experience. 99%
yeah.
of the time when I go through, and I take my time because I don't have to do that, but I want people to understand their value. And so when people are upset about their value, I'll take my extra time and look through the set, like, where did you guys get this initial sales price from? Like, what makes you think that is worth this value? And when I look at the CMA or look at what they utilize, it's usually like really, how like people know that we have 12 months and 1 mile. Y'all heard that, right? So
Yeah.
sales have to be in 12 months and within 1 mile. That's true, but that's the max. You understand? So we want to find the closest, most comparable. So even though we have a mile, we start at a quarter of a mile. If we don't find anything, then we go half a mile. If we don't find anything, then we go 3/4 of a mile. So although we have a mile, we want the closest, most comparable. So even though we have 12 months, I want to see what's in the last 90 days first. And if I can't find anything, then I'll pull out 6 months. If you can't find anything, then 9 months, then 12. So you have the 1 mile and the 12, but you have to get there first. You know what I'm saying? You can't overlook stuff that's closer to the subject that are comparable, to go and say, hey, it's within a mile. Yes, it is, but it's almost right at a mile, and I have something that's on the same street that's a quarter of a mile, So you want the closest, most comparable. You want to deep dive your sales and make sure that they're truly comparable, because they could look comparable on the surface. But as an appraiser, we have specific guidelines that we have to abide by that causes us to have to go much, much deeper. And the other thing that I see a whole lot of is people do their CMA searches and put price in their criteria. That is a no-no. Do not ever put sales price in your criteria, because it's only going to pull up stuff in your price range, when there could very well be sales that are comparable to yours that are not in the price range that you want. So the reason why you can't put price in there is you miss stuff that could be valid. So then when the appraiser goes to do it, you have this nice little CMA that you pull that fits the value that you wanted. But then when the appraiser goes to do it, they're not going to put sales price in. They're going to look at everything in that area so that they can make sure that they have not overlooked anything that's truly comparable, because that's how we find the value. We have to see what's close, what's comparable, and what's recent. And you can't do that with sales price, because sales price is only going to show you what's in that sales price.
Right. So I do have a question. I found that when a lot of the issues you talked about, agents pulling comps, is they don't know how to make adjustments.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a big issue. So
yeah.
Do you have any kind of just general guidelines or advice for maybe a newer agent who's trying to make these adjustments, in terms of square footage, or for bedrooms or baths, some, numbers that they can use for that to kind of help with the adjustment?
Unfortunately, there are not any numbers. It would be great if we had this list that says garages give you this much, fences give you this much, fireplaces but it's not. It's very specific to the area. Mm-hmm. It's no one set number. A garage in one area means something totally different in another area. So if you're in Grant Park where parking storage is rare, then a garage means something different than in a neighborhood where everybody has a garage. Or in some areas, a pool is a great thing. In some areas, a pool is a liability. So it's not, it gets a little difficult in that sense, because it's not one set thing. It's totally dependent on the area. A feature in Buckhead could mean something totally different in Bankhead. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So it's really no one dry cut answer for that. And that does make it difficult, because when you're pulling the CMAs, once you get those 5 or 6 sales or however many you pull, there are going to be adjustments made when the appraisal mm-hmm. come that the agent may or may not know how to apply. So that is a little tricky. I do understand that issue coming in as well. So I definitely have some things in the works that will be of assistance to agents. And is one of the reasons why I went through the process, because the 20 years of me doing it and working with all these agents, I want to, mend that thing where it feels like we're against each other, because we're not. We're in the same game, we're in the same industry, and it's like the appraiser killed the deal. It's like, no, I want us to work together. I want us to understand, you guys understand what we do and we understand what you guys do, and figure out a way to make it work better, because the end result, we want to make sure that the client is satisfied and that they get their home sold for the best price possible and as quickly as possible, without having to sit on the market and get reduced, finally get a buyer, get the appraisal, doesn't come in at the contract, all those things. I want to definitely smooth that over. Like I said, I'm working on some things to kind of put something together where you guys can, look to have that information, to be a little more informed when you're pulling the CMA, so that we can have, that meeting of the minds where we can work together.
Now that would be wonderful.
Yeah,
you will definitely find a home for that.
Top of the year, it'll all be ready for you.
So another thing I think that we kind of wanted to ask, going in that same vein, that there are different ways of determining what is of value for certain areas. What would you say is probably also a tip for homeowners as well when they're going through that appraisal process? We have a lot of people who are first-time homeowners, and they obviously are not going to, a lot of people don't even look at the appraisal. They might not even get the appraisal, but all they see are numbers. So if you can kind of put it into perspective for somebody who's going through that home buying process, mm-hmm. what is it that they should be looking for on that appraisal? The only thing they're looking for is, okay, does it meet the or exceed the contract value? But is there anything that they should kind of look at and say, okay, this may be something that is something that I should be, aware of, or something that is potentially not an issue, but something that I need to know in the future?
Well, a lot of people definitely go straight to the value. They probably never read all of that writing that I have to do. They probably never read it. But I mean, it's good information in there. It tells you about the neighborhood, the boundaries, if there's any airports in the area, railroad tracks, any type of external influences. It gives you maps that show the overhead of the neighborhood, aerial view of the neighborhood. It tells you if the supply and demand are in balance. It tells you how long typical houses stay on the market. That could be some useful information if you're just buying it and later on maybe you want to sell it. So that information is in there, what the typical home, how long it stays on the market. So that could be useful information. The age, the square footage, because sometimes people don't know how big their house is, So there's a whole sketch in there that that gives you the square footage of your home. It gives you information about the neighborhood, school districts, things like that. So there's a wealth of information in the report, but oftentimes most people go straight to the value, and if it hits their value, they really don't care what else is in the report.
Can report until later. Okay, so kind of moving into another thing, something you said earlier about how different values or different things are valued, in different neighborhoods. There's kind of like a character to every neighborhood that kind of informs the appraisal. It kind of led me to think of something else, because I'm going to call it a bad appraisal. I'm just going to call it a bad appraisal.
Okay.
Because I felt that the appraiser wasn't familiar with the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And that he used, again, you mentioned the mile and, 12 months or whatever. He used something that was 2 miles away. He used a foreclosure. He used something that was over a year old. And
was your property a foreclosure?
No, it was not.
Was the market a foreclosure market?
No, this was 2 years ago. So, I made assumptions because I was like, because it's a very nice community next to other very nice communities. And I was like, clearly, this appraiser is just unfamiliar with the properties and the values. And that's kind of where it arrived. And it was very difficult to dispute that appraisal.
And this is what I tell people, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but this is, I tell people, the people that are that if you feel like you had a bad appraisal, or the people that talk about that they feel like their house got appraised lower because of their race and things like that, it's such an easy thing to prove if it happened. All sales are public record. And so if there's sales that are closer in proximity and that are more comparable, and they were skipped over to go 2 miles or skipped over to get a foreclosure, that's really easy to prove. Like all the sales are public record. You can get a field review, and if you have the appraisal, you can get a field review, and that appraisal will go back and retrace all the steps and tell you if that was a good value, or the right comps were utilized, all of that. So, when people say that they feel like they got a bad one, like, that's very easy to do a rebuttal on, because all the sales are public record. So if something was skipped over, or if there's something that's more valid, now it has to be more comparable than what was utilized in the original appraisal. So you can't, bring sales that are further away or larger than the, know what I mean? Like, they have to be better than what was already utilized. And so if the appraisal used something 2 miles and there was something right in the next subdivision, then that's very easy to prove. So what was the issue with yours? Because you said it was hard to prove your case. So what was the issue?
There was a rebuttal. The same appraiser went out, and they did not change the value. There was going to be an independent appraisal done but in the end, the buyer decided to pay the difference. So that's kind of how that all ended up, just a miracle.
So were you able to present sales that you thought were more comparable, or?
Yeah, and they in the next subdivision over, and they denied them. So
And they were closer?
Yeah.
Similar age, square foot? Like, what was the reason to exclude them?
They were a little larger. They just said that they weren't the same, but I'm like, they were a little larger, but not significantly larger.
What's a little larger, Kristen?
They were about maybe 500 square feet.
5,500?
No, like maybe like 500 to 1,000 square feet more. Like it wasn't a lot larger to me.
Wait, it was 1,000 square foot more?
Yeah.
Then what? Then like so when you say 1,000 square foot more, if the house was 1,000 and this one was 2,000, that's a big difference.
No.
So when you say 1,000 square foot more, what was tell me the numbers.
Okay, so oh gosh, I'm like again going back 2 years. This is getting very specific. So this house was, the subject property was, gosh, I think it was a 4.5 with a full finished basement, and the other ones were about 5 to 6 bedrooms, like maybe one extra bedroom and like another bath or half bath. So they were they were very similar. If you saw these two neighborhoods, you know, one's a little nicer than the other one, but they're still very similar. They're like a state home.
So where he went out and got, was it closer to the subject? As far as being one bedroom count, square footage, was it closer?
The foreclosure was in the neighborhood.
Because what you also have to do is see what, like say if you were in a subdivision, what do houses in that particular subdivision go for?
Mm-hmm.
So your best sales would be in that same subdivision. So, but if you're saying he went 2 miles and stuff, there must not have been any sales in the same subdivision. Is that correct?
The only other sale in that subdivision was the foreclosure.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So then in that instance, what I would do is I would do a historical search of that neighborhood. I would take my 1-year date out, and I would look at the last time homes sold in that subdivision that was similar to my subject. What did they sell for? Because that'll give you an idea as well. And then you can just do a time adjustment if it was a year ago or 18 months ago. But it'll give you an idea of what value that subdivision supports. So just because there's a neighboring subdivision, if your current subdivision has not shown to support that value, then you may not be able to use that, even though it's a neighboring subdivision, because the market reaction to it has shown that that neighboring subdivision is pulling in a higher price.
Okay.
That's actually very helpful. You see,
it's a lot, y'all. It's so much that go into it. I tell people, like, if it was so simple, like, we wouldn't have an industry. We have to go through so many like guidelines and variables, and people just do not understand. Like, you pull a CMA, you list the house, but when we get to it, we have guidelines that we have. If we like our freedom and our license, we have these guidelines that we have to follow.
Yes, and I think one of the other things, so I do have like this sparks like 2 more questions, but one of the things that we have that we deal with as well, and people may not be familiar, especially new agents that we're talking.
Oh no, she's frozen, and I don't know what question she's going to ask.
Mid question. You gotta love technology.
Yeah,
I know. There she is. You were frozen, girl.
An extra layer that you should be looking out for, some other things you should be looking out for, if it's an FHA or maybe a VA. And so if you can kind of talk to
Justia, stop for a second. You were frozen for a while, so we missed the whole beginning of your question.
Okay. I'm talking to myself. So it kind of, so what you just said sparked a couple of questions, and one of them being, especially for newer agents, is there anything that they should be aware of? Because we know that there are sometimes extra components that they should be aware of when it comes to FHA or a VA kind of loan. There are extra things that we need to be on the lookout for.
Well, I can't really speak to VA. VA has their own panel of appraisers. And so I'm not a VA appraiser, so they may have some different stuff that I may not be able to speak to.
Okay.
But with FHA, they do a little deeper dive. We have to check the water. We have to do a representative sample, turn the water on, make sure that there's no leaks, flush the toilet, make sure there's no leaks, turn on the appliances and make sure that they work. FHA is real concerned about health and safety, like safety hazards and things like that, peeling paint, and if the stairs have the proper handrails and things like
Oh
that.
my gosh.
So they're real concerned with health and safety.
Yeah, that is really important, I think, especially for newer agents to be aware, or people who don't work as much with FHA.
Right.
Sometimes people are shocked and surprised. So I definitely did want to make sure that people knew about that as well. And the other thing that I really kind of wanted to talk about is the industry as a whole. We've been hearing that there's kind of more of a shortage of appraisers, and then there also is, room for more diversity in the field. So, what would you tell some of the folks who may be interested in becoming an appraiser? What's the pathway for them?
Okay. The reason why I laughed is because this is my 20th year and I still get, "Are you the appraiser?" Like, yes. So there definitely needs to be more of us, and definitely more females. I mean, it's definitely a male-dominated industry, but so what? I go in attics, I go in crawl spaces, and I'm still cute. So when I first started appraising, I used to still have my little heels on and stuff, honey. Now I have my Timberlands. Like 20 years now, I have my Timberlands on, my polo.
That's right.
But it's a great field. I definitely would suggest it to anyone that likes numbers, that likes being in the field, measurements. It's exciting. I ride in Atlanta now, and almost every neighborhood I go in, I'm like, oh, I did that house before. I did that house. I've probably done a little over 5,000 appraisals in Atlanta and the surrounding counties. But it's definitely a great field. They say it's a shortage. It may be because when the market crashed, there was a lot of changes made to the appraisal industry, the amount of hours that you have to have. So everyone takes a 90-hour course to become an appraiser.
Okay.
I don't know if they offer them in person. When I did it years ago, it was in person, but I think mostly everything now is online. But you take a 90-hour course. Once you finish that course, then you have to find a certified appraiser to do your field hours under. It used to be able to be a licensed appraiser, but one of the changes that they made is that now your training has to be done under a certified appraiser, which is the highest level of residential appraising. And then you used to have 1,000 hours, and I think now it's 2,000 and 2,500 hours that can be done in no less than 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And now you have to have a college degree as well.
Wow. So I do have a question about that, because I have a colleague who's a realtor, and she wanted to get into that field.
Now you just went on pause.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So that's interesting that you said that, because I have we have a colleague who's interested, in moving into the appraisal field, and she said that she had difficulty finding that person to work with. So and that no one would do it. So I guess, like, how easy is it, or how do you develop that relationship? Like, what's that process like?
Well, I probably get a call almost every other week with someone that has finished a 90-hour course and they're looking for a mentor. And nobody, like I said, they changed it from 1,000 hours to like 2,000 and 2,500. And it could be done in no less than 2 years. And so that certified, and you can't be a licensed appraiser anymore. You have to be a certified appraiser. Most appraisers are one woman, one man shops. And they don't want that 2-year commitment or the liability or whatever the reason is. There's not a lot of people that are willing to train. I'm probably one of the few people in the Atlanta area that does offer training. We're only allowed to have 3 trainees at a time. So I have 3 trainees and 5 people on the waiting list. So I'm trying to do my part, but I'm just one person. But people don't want to train. I mean, it's a long commitment, you know. But we have to get more of our community, you know, involved, and so that there is diversity and fairness and that kind of thing. But yeah, so once you get out of that 90 hours, if you get past because a lot of people get stopped at the degree hurdle. So if you get past that hurdle, then the next hurdle is finding that mentor that is willing to commit to you and train you for 2 years. So I mean, it's definitely, when I got out, somebody trained me, and I, you know, for all intensive purposes, I've trained several people and got them to their certification. So I've done my part as well, but there continue to be people that need it, you know. So I'm trying.
Okay, good.
But I'm just one person, and I literally every other week.
That is awesome.
And I feel bad for him. One guy said he went down the appraisal registry and was just calling line by line until he got somebody that would be willing to train him. Yeah.
You
and I get it, because you want your own schedule. You want, you know, you don't, if you got you already certified, but you got a trainee, they're going to be hungry. They, you know, they're going to be calling you like, hey, are we training today? And, you know, appraisals like their flexibility. They like doing what they like with their schedule. And so when you have a trainee, you have to have a commitment to them, and you have to really give them what was given to you for you to get your license. So, you know, I take it seriously. So, but it is definitely a time commitment.
Yeah, in this market, y'all are like extremely busy, too. Yeah. So.
We really are. It's a lot.
Oh my God.
And it's not the only thing that I do. So I do all of that. Like, I know some people that this is all they do. That's just one of the things that I do. So it's definitely a challenge, but I try to be and give back to our community as much as I can.
That's fantastic. Awesome. And I did have one more question for you, and I just want to go back to the appraisal part. For those, there are some people who don't know this, but you can get an independent appraisal of your home for any particular reason that for any reason that you have. With homes that I have encountered a few homes where there are the values for homes are all over the place. It's in a community with all kinds of mixed values, and they have custom home. So in that particular case, what's your approach?
So if you're in an area where there's a wide range of value, then again, it's that deep diving. It's that, okay, if these houses are going for 200 and these are going for 150 and they're in the same proximity, what's the difference? What is the market reacting to that's different, that's causing that difference in price? And then once you find out what that is, then you look at your subject property and say, is my subject property like the $200,000 houses? Or are they like the $150,000 houses? So it just all goes down to breaking down the amenities and the features to see what is matching with your subject and what the market reaction was to whatever those features are. So, but yeah, there's a lot of times when there's a lot of different value in a neighborhood, and you just got to go in and literally pull up each one and break down all the amenities to see which one is your subject most comparable to.
Yes, I agree.
No shortcut to it. Actually, if you do it right, there's no shortcut to it.
Right, because we have encountered where neighborhoods where you have those varying prices, and the one home that we're looking at is a home that is a custom build, and it's completely different from anything else.
Yeah.
So that's why we always suggest, let's get some expert opinion. That's where we're bringing you in.
And I tell people too, when you do your renovations and whatever, you don't ever want to be the biggest and best.
Oh, I tell
because it may or may not be anything to compare it to. So you may not get your investment back from. You're not going to get dollar for dollar what you spent on whatever that particular thing is. If all the houses are 1,000 square feet and you make yours 2,000, You know, if all the homes are 3 bedrooms and you make a 6-bedroom house, then you may not get the value for that. It could be considered an over improvement or super adequacy, you know? So it just depends. You definitely don't want to be the biggest and best, but if you're in an area and there's a wide range of value, the best advice is to go and deep dive each sale. Look at the bedrooms, look at the baths, look at the square footage. Does it have a pool? Does it have parking storage? Is it 1 level, 2 level? Is it split for you? Like, let's compare apples to apples, you know? Right. That is the best way to do it. And sometimes you want to make sure that in MLF a lot, in public records, I see where they add everything together, which is really confusing. So you could think that you're looking at a 2,000 square foot house, but it's really a 1,500 square foot house with a 500 square foot basement, and they just added it all together. So that's another instance I see that happen a lot. So you have to go in and see, is this the gross living area or if this is the basement? And I think that's a thing that people get confused a lot as to when you add them together or when are they separate. As far as basement. So like if the house has 3 bedrooms in the house and 2 bedrooms in the basement, and then they're listing it as a 5-bedroom. That's a 3-bedroom with a finished basement with 2 bedrooms in it. So, but sometimes on the listing, because the agent may or may not know how to decipher that, they list it as a 5-3. When really 2 of the bedrooms and 1 of the bathrooms is in the basement. So this is a 3-2 house with a 2-1 in the basement, but they list it as a 5-3. And so if you go pull your CMA and you're looking for other 5-3s and you put, so then now you have something on your CMA that's not valid. So if you open up the sale and actually look into it and see what the features are, does it have a basement? All these bedrooms, are they all above grade? Like, we got to break all of that down. And a lot of times the listings are not correct. And so I don't know, because like I said, I just finished the course and finished the exam, but I didn't see a thing in there that said anything about that. About how you do your listing. Do you find that out like once you pick a brokerage? Is that how that works? Like, where do you learn that part? How to fill out your listing?
Oh, that's in your post licensing, in your mentoring. That's where you find that out.
But you're in your post licensing 1 year later.
You have a year to take it. But if you're
you don't
smart,
learn how to fill out the listing until then.
No, you get somebody to help you.
You'll have somebody help you. A lot of the brokerages have mentorship programs. So that's one of the things. Both Kristen and I have a background with real estate, so we already knew how to fill all that stuff out, and we already knew all the attributes and all that stuff. But many people don't know, and that's probably the biggest advantage for newer agents, to really seek help before you go out and do what you have to do. But everybody operates independently, so that's another thing to keep in mind. So unless you are an employee of a brokerage.
And
I just see like a lack of uniformity. Like, it just seems like everybody kind of do their own. Everybody have their own little formula, own little way of doing it. But we rely so much on those listings because we don't go inside of the comparable properties. All we have is what the agents put in that listing. All we have is what they describe in that little paragraph and the features and the interior photos. And we hopeful that the interior photos are good ones, because I've seen some listings. I was like, the homeowner must have never seen their listing. If you see some of like the pictures that they have in these listings, I'm like, whoever let them list their house must have never looked at the listing, because they have blurry pictures. Sometimes they only have 1 or 2 pictures. Sometimes the pictures be really small, like you can't even enlarge them. I'm like, do you know that most people look at the listings and decide which house they want to look at further? So if they can't even get past the listing, I don't understand that part. Can y'all? Now I'm gonna ask a question. Can y'all help me with that?
One thing to see, like, but when you were talking about the MLS, so the reason why we get that like combined number in the MLS is because they ask us to put how many bedrooms are like on the first floor, the main floor, and below. So like, and then they just add them all up, and so you do have to literally, when I do CMAs, go in to go, okay, like, are these all like,
and deep dive?
ground floor
It's
and main floor and above, or is this a basement where there's 2 more bedrooms? So yeah,
and there's no shortcut. There's
There
no
isn't.
shortcut. You gotta open the listing and deep dive it. It's no
is it
shortcut.
like original like 1975, or is it a totally renovated 1975? Like what?
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. So to see, you're going to talk about the pictures. That's like a personal pet peeve of ours.
Well, I would say, and we're sharing with our larger audience. We're not talking about anybody in particular, just as a caveat.
Yeah, just disclosure.
Full disclosure. So as a team, we are really into the professionalism of our industry. And so we feel like professional photography really does convey so much. And people do really want to see a house based on pictures. A lot of it is based on pictures. And so when you see that there's a professional photographer and you have pictures that are absolutely exceptional, it does make the average home buyer want to go visit that property versus not being able to see, how big a room is. I mean, obviously pictures you can make different angles, but how big a room is, what's in the room, how is it set up? Do you see doors different places? How's the entrance set up? I mean, all of these things could be of real import to a home buyer. And it may say, okay, this is the reason why I want to see the home or why I don't need to put this on the list right now. So that's the importance of pictures. And so, I mean, I know they probably don't have appraisals in mind for the pictures, but for us, they are paramount because that truly helps sell a home.
Yeah, like my biggest
the pictures sell the house. The picture makes the people want to go see it in person.
Yeah.
So if you got raggedy pictures,
that's
and now you got cell phones. If you can't do the professional pictures, you got cell phones now that take really good pictures. Like it's really no excuse.
So everybody, all the realtors out there, we've heard this, right? So this is
stop taking pictures of beds. Like no one wants to see a picture of the bed. You're taking that bed with you. We want to see the room. So like that's my pet peeve. I was like, I don't care about this bed.
But there are all kinds of intricacies of home buying. And so this is why we rely on professionals such as us, such as yourself. And so this is really helpful because, and I have to honestly tell you, when we told people that we were going to be talking to you, most of the reaction was, can you please ask this question? Can you please ask her why my appraisal is so low? No, I cannot ask about your particular appraisal, but I will definitely say that is one of the most common questions. And I think that it really does help what you're talking about, what you're going to bring out at the top of the year to help real estate agents really truly understand what these values and how these values are determined, what the attributes are like, and even things like bedrooms, how many bedrooms, if they're below grade and all that. Some folks just did not know that. And so that's why it's so critical.
And so many people, I realize, don't know an appraiser. You guys are like unicorns to a lot of us. They're like, have you ever met an appraiser before? Like, do you like have a friend that no? So that's also a part of it. There's so little kind of interaction, I think, outside the transaction between like the appraiser and the agent to try to get a better understanding of how we can help each other, or what each other do. So, awesome.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome, guys. And if you have any residential valuation needs, don't hesitate to reach out to Real Appraisals. You can reach us on Instagram at Real Appraisals. The website is realappraising.com.
We have it scrolling right now.
Yes, thank you guys so much for having me. And I'd come back anytime. Just let me know.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.